Well, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning. Uh, it's a very vast subject, and what I decided is to take you on a very brief world tour of what is happening with the humanitarian crisis, and with that, share few facts and leave the conclusion with you folks, and because I see there are a number of opportunities available for the researchers and academicians when we discuss about the overall situation in the world in terms of humanitarian crisis and the need of more funding. So the world today spends around 25 billion to provide life-saving assistance to 125 million people devastated by wars and natural disasters. This amount is 12 times greater than it was 15 years ago. Over the last years, conflicts and natural disasters have led to fast-growing numbers of people in need and a funding gap for humanitarian action of an estimated US $15 billion. This is a lot of money, but not out of reach for a world which produces $78 trillion of annual GDP. UN has recently hosted the world first humanitarian summit in Istanbul in May of 2016. The summit has identified three important and interdependent aspects of the humanitarian financing challenge. Number one, reducing the needs. Two, mobilizing additional funds through either traditional or innovative mechanisms. Three, improving the efficiency of humanitarian assistance. Summit concluded that the best way to deal with growing humanitarian needs is to address their root causes. This requires a strong determination at the highest level of global political leadership to prevent and resolve conflicts and to increase investment in disaster risk reduction, especially in the most vulnerable communities and countries. Because development is the best resilience builder of all, the summit believed that the world's scarce resources of official development assistance should be used where it matters the most, especially in the situations of fragility, and now they are identifying the fragile states. In addition, there is a need of systematic investment in peace building and conflict resolution at the international level. There is a suggestion to put 1% of core funding allocated to peace operations from assessed contribution of the UN member states into the United Nations Peace Building Fund. Similarly, countries at risk of natural disaster should have emergency reserve funds and dedicate DRR budget lines for risk reduction activities and for receiving funding when disaster hit. Countries hosting refugees should integrate displacement into their development plans and obtain predictable and adequate international support. Now let's see what is happening in the Muslim world. During 1960-2010, the number of natural disasters around the world significantly increased from about 600 occurrences in the 60s to almost 4,500 during the 2000s. And it tells that we are entering into 21st century, claiming to be more technologically advanced and so on. This is an increase of 7.5 times. Whereas in the Muslim world, this increase is 9 times higher. So if Muslims have 134 incidents in the 1970s to 1,178 incidents in the 2000s. OIC countries has a constant share of 23% of the world population, but their share in disaster is well over 26%. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, which is a 57 Muslim member state network, it has started its disaster prevention and humanitarian assistance in the wake of war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. which is very new in 1990. And they have established a formal Islamic Cooperation Humanitarian Affairs Department in 2008. So you can see that the whole process is still in infancy. The Muslim world has a robust network of humanitarian aid organizations, primarily funded by community contributions, which provide rapid response and relief services. The large portion of Muslim funding, however, is spent on providing emergency relief to the victims of natural and man-made disasters, with very little left behind to spend on the disaster preparedness or conflict prevention, and sadly enough, to investing in the future of next generations, be it education, health, and so on. But recently, there's a lot of discussion about Islamic charitable giving is being viewed as a promising new resource for future humanitarian assistance. The current funding gap in humanitarian assistance has pushed humanitarian actors to start thinking creatively about how humanitarian assistance is raised, processed, and used. One thinking that has emerged over the last few years has been the potential for Islamic social financing, led by zakat. Islamic financing is surprisingly underexplored territory because previous estimates suggest that anywhere between US 200 billion to 1 trillion is spent in form of Islamic charitable giving across the Muslim world each year. The recent research by Global Humanitarian Assistance, GHA, indicates that this area of finance is potentially in the hundreds of billions of dollars, with a significant portion already going on humanitarian efforts. Well, the globalization of increasing poverty made it more immediate through social media that the need of Muslim money into the Muslim world, especially around the disaster, is immensely needed. It is estimated that 1/4 of the Muslim world is living on less than $1.2 a day, with new spaces opening up in the Muslim world such as Somalia, Syria, Mali, and now recently Yemen. We all know that the concept of charity is central to social justice, which is a sacred value in Islam and a central tenet of the faith. Zakat, the mandatory Muslim practice of giving 2.5% of one's accumulated wealth for charitable purposes every year, is one of the main tools of Islamic social financing. It is explicitly intended to reduce inequality and is widely used in Muslim countries to fund domestic development and poverty reduction efforts. There are clear parallels to be drawn between the 8 individual categories of eligibility of zakat listed in the Quran and people in need of humanitarian assistance. The GHA report findings show that it is currently impossible to accurately find out how much zakat is being collected globally, where it is being spent, and what opportunities it could present for the humanitarian world. With estimates ranging from the tens to hundreds of billions of dollars and only a handful of countries formally reporting a proportion of the zakat that is given by their population, there is a lot of work to do. Although interest in zakat is growing, there has been a lack of data-led evidence of its scale, use, and potential. In 2013, faith-based organization globally received and delivered, and I'm talking about the Muslim organization, between $420 million, which make roughly about 15% of the international humanitarian assistance. The global volume of zakat collected each year through formal mechanism is at the very least in the tens of billions of dollars. Data collected from Indonesia, Malaysia, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, which makes up 70% of the world's estimated Muslim population, indicate that in these countries alone, at least 5.7 billion is currently collected in zakat each year. Between 23 to 57% of zakat currently collected is used for humanitarian assistance, depending on the context in which it is raised and used. It is therefore likely that zakat is already a significant source of humanitarian financing in many places and has the potential to provide more. There are a number of logistical and ideological questions to address if the potential of zakat for humanitarian assistance is to be realized. Logistically, who should collect zakat for humanitarian assistance? How and to what extent should this be formalized? What mechanisms should channel it for humanitarian response? How can conflicting interpretations on who is eligible to receive zakat to be reconciled with each other and with humanitarian principles? These issues highlight the need for further engagement between humanitarian and Islamic leaders to establish mutual understanding and guidance. And I believe that the academic and research institutions can play an extremely important role in this space. This should be the basis for working together to improve channels between Zakat Fund and the international humanitarian response system, and for efforts to increase the use of Zakat for humanitarian assistance to be combined with those of the wider development community to ensure complementarity. So if we look at the need is enormous, humanitarian funding gap is big, yet a lot of money is being raised, but it is not institutionalized, so hence it is not showing the impact it should, and it is also not supported by an accurate data and other innovative ways of how to collect and distribute the zakat or other Muslim philanthropy giving. So these are the challenges I would like to share with you, and we can't have answers for all, but I think it's a good beginning to maybe explore more cooperation. Thank you.